Hi, my name is Laura Bonazinga-Bouye, and I'm a speech pathologist who specializes in social communication. We're here to talk today about how you can support your child's social exchange or communication between people. We can support social exchange by fostering language and communication. So what is social communication? Social communication is essentially a reciprocal exchange, a back and forth interaction. We might exchange body clues. We might show something with our face, our body, our proximity, how close we are to someone, how far away we are from someone. We might give a message that signals our feelings, what we're experiencing inside our minds or in our bodies. We might also share with purpose. For example, if I wanted to obtain something or keep an interaction going, I might reach my hand out, I might wave to start an interaction, or I might just share words and ideas to start or continue an interaction. Social communication is a lot like a dance. I give a message, someone receives it, they might send a message back. Sometimes I might invite a message, a bid, or an invitation to connect, and someone might not receive it. When they don't receive it, we oftentimes change our body clues, feelings, words, and ideas to make sure that our message is received. Our communicative partners, which include children, our own children, other friends, community members, are also giving us messages and receiving messages from us across settings. Today, we're going to talk about how we can support social communication. During this exchange, it's a lot like a give and take, oftentimes referred to as a serve and return. I might give a nonverbal clue, a clue with my body or face that does not contain words, and then I wait to see how it's received by my communicative partner. I might also show what I'm thinking and feeling with my face and body, or give direct words, or even share a longer idea. This reciprocal exchange begins to develop early in infancy. Children are primed as social beings to look for connection with others. As soon as they detect a living or biological agent in their environment, usually a caregiver, they usually orient to that caregiver and they look for information. They're gathering this information through their senses, what they see, what they smell, what they hear, what they touch, and even what they taste. And at first, babies do not act with purpose or intention. They're actually reacting to the sensory aspects of their environment. These foundations for social communication begin to develop as children make sense of their world through their senses. Eventually, children begin to engage in goal-directed or purposeful communication. That means instead of just reacting and cooing or crying when they are in need, they start to act with purpose. They reach a hand out towards something that they're looking to obtain. They might also coo or smile towards a caregiver or another communicative partner to exchange how they're feeling. They might also begin to interact with their environment in purposeful ways. For instance, they might spin, mouth, or explore the sensory aspects of a toy or another stimuli in their environment. During this early development, children also begin to use eye gaze. That's very different from eye contact. Eye gaze refers to using our eyes to obtain information from our environment or from other social partners, and also to give information. For example, if I were to gaze off screen right now, make a scared or startled face, you might wonder what my eyes were noticing. You would be getting some social information from my gaze. Additionally, early in toddlerhood, children begin to use gestures. They might nod their head, shake their head. They might begin to point. Children often point in proto-declarative ways where they're trying to show something. At first, it might even be an open hand. Eventually, it becomes a point. They might also point to obtain or request something, which we refer to as proto-imperative pointing. There are many other gestures that children begin to develop and use throughout the first year of their life. The amount of gestures or the variety of gestures that we see in children is often connected to the variety of words and ideas that a child acquires later in development. So using eye gaze and gestures, modeling them, responding to them, can support a children's social communication later in development. In addition to developing gestures and the use of eye gaze, children also begin to communicate more with their nonverbals, communication without words. They might begin to even change their voice, their tone of voice, the pitch, the rhythm, rate, or even the intonation of their voice to signal a change in feeling or thinking, to give a different purposeful message. As children are vocalizing and showing us what they're thinking and feeling with their eyes and gestures and nonverbal communication, they actually begin to shape their cooing, crying, and babbling into more meaningful and functional communication. However, it's important to remember that children are actually communicating as early as a few days of life when they're following your eyes or using their eyes to communicate. In conclusion, we have this innate sense to be social. Children are primed to look for others to interact with. And between 6 to 9 months of age, children also begin to coordinate their attention between what a caregiver might be looking at or referencing and an object that is also of mutual interest. For example, if I was to look towards this as a caregiver, most likely a child between 6 to 9 months of age would notice the top and then look back to my face and eye gaze to see what I thought about it. If it was something that was scary, they might notice that. If it was something that was exciting and had maybe a sensory component that might be interesting, the child might also share interest towards that object, event, or person of mutual interest. Children are also continuing to develop their gaze, gestures, and pointing, and by 10 to 18 months of age, they are typically engaging in back and forth emotional signaling. I give a little message of excitement, anticipation, joy. They might respond to it. They might have the same feeling or a different feeling, and they give a message back to me. We're sharing attention about the same object, event, or person, and it does not mean that our thinking needs to match. For instance, I might have a preference for something that spins, while you might not prefer that. As long as we're both engaged in the same object of interest, we are engaged with each other and interacting, exchanging social communication. We would love to see this reciprocal communication continue to develop, and eventually it mimics a conversation. Communication between partners is often like a fluid dance, a little bit of a back and forth. It can happen with words or without words, as you can see here.
We need to work on that, right? Yes, okay. Did you understand it though? No. Okay. All right. Huh? Oh, not this one. This is the grand finale of it. Yeah, that's the last one. That's what I was wondering. I don't know what they're gonna do next season because they did some stuff this time. Exactly what I was thinking. Oh yeah. Right, don't bring that in. You know what I'm saying? Don't do the same stuff. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, I was thinking that. Yeah. Like go somewhere else with that, but don't break here. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. That's what I said. And then it was like, you know what I'm saying? And I was like, what in the world? But don't do it here. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. Really? I thought the same thing. We think a lot alike, huh?
As you can see in that video, there's a lot of exchange. There's a lot of back and forth. At one point, there's just the exchange of eye gaze. The caregiver looks towards the child looks back, makes a face that signals a feeling or a thought or a change in his thinking pattern. Then there's a little bit of pointing. They exchange a lot with very few words. I would say that the quality of social interaction in that video is fairly high, even without those words. So how do we cultivate or create the conditions for language, communication, and play to develop? Language, communication, and play form the foundations for social communication or effective exchange between people. There are several areas that we can support or create conditions for that will enhance your child's social communication. Joint attention is one important part of development. Joint attention refers to the sharing of eye gaze, a gesture, or a verbalization towards an object, event, or person of interest. Oftentimes, there's some sense of initiation, a start to an interaction, where someone is directing or inviting attention towards an object. This can be done by looking and making a facial expression. This can be done by pointing towards something. It can also be done by subtly looking towards something. Remember, we're primed to notice where people's eye gaze is facing or directing. Additionally, when someone directs or invites attention towards something, we often respond, even naturally. We follow their attention towards that object, or we accept the invitation to think about that object, event, or person of interest. Joint attention is more about sharing attention than having the same thoughts or feelings. When we are engaged in the triad of joint attention, it's a little bit like a triangle. I look towards someone's face, I notice what they're looking towards, and in this instance, the character with the hat is looking towards a fish. The character on the left realizes he's thinking about the fish, and maybe they both have a thought about the fish. Remember, you might have different thoughts, feelings, or preferences about the fish, but once you're both looking, you're actually mutually engaged. That means you are sharing attention. Sharing attention, or joint attention, forms the foundation for learning language. In order to know the difference between a top and a fish, I need to be able to notice that someone is gazing towards or looking towards the top and adding in the word top. That's very different or discriminated from me looking towards the fish and calling it a fish. Here's an example of what shared attention looks like during a joint book reading interaction.
Bye. Bye. My teacher. Yeah. No, I want to see from my teacher. I want to see from my teacher. And I want to see. There you go. Come pick me.
In that video, the child is actually beginning to engage in socio-dramatic play, where children begin to apply everyday routines, rituals, or experiences to their play. It becomes very symbolic, where they're representing something that is actually not occurring in real life. For example, he was having the characters kiss. He was beginning to talk about the characters having their own internal experiences, like what they want. He was also beginning to engage in a pretend play routine. There are many differences and individual ways that children communicate. These individual differences create the beauty of our very neurodiverse world. When a child is experiencing autism, related differences or disorders, they might engage in different types of communication. For example, they might speak with words or they might not speak with words. An individual might communicate through sign language, through text, through nonverbals, even through eye gaze. Additionally, when we think about neurodiverse communication or differences that we see across our different beautiful brains, we have different preferences and tendencies. For example, I might prefer to be really close and affectionate with my communicative partners. Another person might not have that preference. They might prefer more space or proximity, and they might not prefer to show affection through touch. Additionally, we have preferences for the amount of social communication that we engage in on a daily basis. I might prefer to sit and chat with a friend, or I might prefer to speak over the phone or send a quick text. Children also have these different preferences and tendencies. Some children prefer to show what they are engaging in or what they're thinking about. Other children prefer more solitary engagement or solitary interaction. We also have tendencies. That is an example of something, a communication style or preference that we are drawn towards. For example, when I walk into a room, I have a tendency to look around and see who's there and try to interact with them. I don't actually do well with long silences, something I'm working on. Another communicative partner might actually prefer those silences, and they might actually feel quite comfortable. They have a tendency towards more silence, even when they're sharing social space. Our style can also be different. For example, some communicators like to weave in different thoughts, ideas, and sensory experiences into their interactions. They might enjoy exploring a little bit, maybe even exploring a lot without interacting. They might enjoy exploring and labeling. This is magnetic. The fish, they're both yellow. They might enjoy sharing more about what they're exploring. That's one style of communication. Others might enjoy or prefer exploring without words, without interaction, and then sharing their conclusion at the end. They're both yellow and they're both magnetic. We also have many different interests, which is part of the beauty of social interaction. Social interaction is one great opportunity to learn new interests and also notice what someone else is interested in. Some of these interests might be fleeting. I might be interested in birds today, animals tomorrow, and books the next day, or they might be highly fixed. For example, I might always be interested in birds and enjoy talking about them, thinking about them, sharing about them. You might find your child really fixated on one interest. They become really strong. They develop really strong knowledge about those interests, which is a beautiful thing. Some communicators also might be rigid or flexible in their interests and in their communication style. For example, some might prefer to know exactly what's going to happen in an interaction, who they might see, what might be expected of them, what sensory experiences they will have when they're in that interaction. They might feel really, really rigid. They might rely upon that predictability and knowing what they can expect. Others might have a tendency towards being more flexible. For example, they might like to show up and see what's happening spontaneously without a whole lot of predictability. Additionally, when we think about social communication across our individual differences, some of our communication might be really effective, which means it allows me to communicate my thoughts, ideas, feelings, and goals, and also share space while someone else is experiencing and communicating their thoughts, feelings, ideas, and goals. We call that effective social exchange, one where we can share space and exchange information effectively. Effective exchange relies upon both of us feeling like we can express our authentic self, our ideas, our thoughts, our preferences, and also share space with someone else. Ineffective communication happens when someone wants to share a thought, feeling, idea, or experience, and they don't feel like they can, or they don't feel like the way that they prefer and tend to communicate is honored. Ineffective exchange also happens when we try to communicate a thought, feeling, idea, or goal, and the other person doesn't get our message, or it doesn't work for both of us to share the social space. It's important to remember that there's a lot of beauty in these individual differences. You might be wondering what individual differences your child shows you every day. So what can we do to support the foundations? Social exchange is important so that we can communicate, enjoy others, eventually access education, play, relationships, and even later in life, a vocation. It's important to support the foundations, and we can do this in a loving and caring way. When you're thinking about the foundations for social communication, I encourage you to get face-to-face, which means get down on your child's level. As much as possible, be in their field of view. When your child is interested in something, like this fish, you might even find yourself bringing it just across your face, not requiring your child to look, but drawing it up across your face to make sure that you get the triangle of joint attention. For example, if your child is here and they're looking at the fish, you can actually get down at the level of the fish because they might even notice what you're showing on your face or with your eye gaze, and they might connect that to the fish. Then they might learn that this is an orange fish. Additionally, if a child is interested in something that you're holding, you can bring it up towards your eyes and just across your face. Remember, we're never forcing joint attention or attention towards your face, but we are inviting it. It's creating an opportunity. Additionally, we can wait for communication. Waiting is really hard, especially when you're really chatty like I am. It's important to give a message. That could be eye gaze, a facial expression, words, ideas, a request, or even a direction, and then wait. When your child does anything, when they act in any different way, a coo, changing their eye gaze, closing their eyes for a second, any type of movement or message is counted as intentional or purposeful. When we wait for communication and we treat it as if it's purposeful or meaningful, we can also then imitate our child, which shows them that what they have to say and the way that they are saying it is important for the interaction. Lastly, when it's tolerated or preferred by your child or your communicative partner, you can add emphatic facial expressions and tone of voice. That requires slowing ourselves down, speaking with a little more intention, putting more stress on words or your feelings. All of those aspects of your communication highlight what's salient or socially important. When we're supporting the foundation for shared attention, we're trying to establish that triangle or social referencing. We're trying to invite and create the opportunity for our communicative partner or our child to look towards what we're looking towards. We're hoping for a coordinated eye gaze without ever forcing it. We can do this when we're face-to-face by engaging in social games. Peekaboo is one of the most effective and important games that we can play in early childhood. Peekaboo requires that the child kind of look towards us or invites the opportunity. We actually take away stimuli and then we give them stimuli. We give them a message from our face. Even just the anticipation of what we might do with our face can actually ignite the sensory experience of the child that we're communicating with and engage in a back and forth game of emotional signaling. It's a lot like a conversation. Pat-a-cake is another game that you can play. Additionally, if your child is not engaged in peekaboo or pat-a-cake, you can also follow your child's interest. If they are interested in tapping and noticing the auditory experience of tapping, you can be interested in that. Remember, the foundation for communication and social exchange is when we're both engaged in the same thing, even if we have different interests or different thoughts. You can continue to track items across your face, especially those things that are interesting to your child. And remember, when attention is low, you can always add a sensory component to gain attention or to invite attention. For example, if I know that my child really likes visual stimuli, I could use a top. This top spinning gives me a lot of different stimulation into my eyes, and it might be more engaging because it's something that I'm interested in. You can add noises, tickles, squeezes, or even add in an action toy, a toy that has some type of action associated with it. Remember, we're never forcing these experiences. We're just trying to get a little bit of attention or invite a little bit of an opportunity to be mutually engaged. I like to remind myself to get in sync in order to get engagement. For example, even if I think it's really mundane, maybe even boring or not interesting to tap, if I actually forget about my own preferences and interests, and I think about this tapping, I might realize that there's something that I like about it. I might even realize that there's something that my child likes about it. And then we can be engaged together. When we match interests and get in sync, we're then able to see opportunities for imitation. And imitation is one other important part of social communication. When I imitate words and actions of my child, I'm entering into their experience. Once I've entered into their experience, I can begin to gently expand. For example, I could repeat what they're doing. I've imitated their words or actions. I could repeat what they're doing. I could even add a little bit of narration. Cup, as I'm tapping it, or tap. Or maybe I could just narrate what I think that they're experiencing or thinking about. Lastly, I could begin to add words, ideas, or actions. So don't forget to get in sync, forming the foundation for mutual engagement. Once we're engaged, we also begin to share our minds. This essentially means that everything that we can't see someone's thoughts, can't really see their feelings. We guess thoughts and feelings by noticing body clues, those non-verbal messages that we see on people's faces, on their bodies, the clues that we hear in their voices, even what they do with how close or far away they are from us, communicates the internal experience of our communicative partner. We all have internal experiences. They come from our senses. For example, I smell something, I have a thought, it smells delicious, I think I'd like to obtain it, so I look around and see what that delicious smell is so that I can eat it. I might even have a feeling about it. It's something that I prefer and it brings a lot of joy to me. When we show and label our thoughts and feelings, we're making these experiences more salient or more clear for the child that we're communicating with. We can show and label our own thoughts and feelings, and we can also imitate those of our child to show them that we've got their message. Thinking states often refer to the contents of our mind. Think is a thinking state. Wanting is a thinking state. Experiencing physiological states like hunger or cold, those are all internal states. Other thinking states for our older communicators or our children with more language include things like thinking and believing versus knowing. For example, I could think that there's ice cream at the store in my neighborhood. I believe there's ice cream in my neighborhood because it's almost always there and we get it often. But I don't know for sure that there's ice cream. We could show up and they could be all out of ice cream. We could show up and they could not have my favorite kind. We could show up and they've decided not enough people buy ice cream, so they've discontinued it. Think, believe, and know are all different degrees of certainty, different ways that we experience our world. Labeling those allow children to think flexibly about their own experience and others, which also helps them to socially communicate. When we consider feeling states, which are usually the most obvious for young children, we can signal these by drawing attention towards our face without forcing it. I'm never telling a child to look unless there is a dangerous situation or it's needed for safety, but rather what I'm doing is just circling my face, adding a little sensory component to invite someone orienting towards my face. I might gesture for body clues. I might circle my face and then label that I'm feeling joy. I might even highlight my eyebrows are up, my eyes are wide, my mouth is open. I'm so surprised that you've finally mastered this skill. I also want to accept and validate all thinking and feeling states because they are valid. They are the internal experience of your communicative partner. We can also bounce back or guess our child's feelings. It looks like you're feeling sad that they didn't have ice cream today. And eventually we can engage in a back and forth game with our feelings because remember, once we're mutually engaged, we oftentimes actually have different thoughts, feelings, or experiences. And the exchange of those thoughts, feelings, and experiences allow us to have a higher quality of social connection. There's something called mental state talk that we often remind, well, ourselves and also parents that we're working with to add into their daily lives. Mental state talk refers to narrating exactly what you're experiencing inside your mind and body. We can insert or add in these mental and feeling words, those thinking and feeling words, into almost anything that you're doing. You can narrate your thoughts and actions in everyday routines and rituals. For example, I might be thinking, gosh, I wish I had more dish soap. I believed I had dish soap because I bought it from the store, but I must not have put it here. I've forgotten where the dish soap is. Oh, look, I found it. I knew we had dish soap. We also might narrate our child's actions. We can narrate what they're doing, and we can make a guess about what they're thinking and feeling, knowing that they'll hopefully give us a message to confirm what they're thinking and feeling. When we label the feeling by labeling body clues and connecting them to our emotional states, remember that eyebrows up, eyes wide, mouth wide open, I'm surprised. When we do that, we're actually making it really clear what we're thinking and feeling. We can add this mental state talk into most everyday routines and rituals and play and joint book reading. For example, when you're reading with your child, even a book without words, you might draw their attention towards what you see on the face of a character. For example, she's leaning in, she has her hand to her ear, her eyebrows are up, she's looking up. I think she's listening for something. She's wondering where that noise is coming from. So she gives a message, in this case, la, 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 and then she looks up. She's noticing if anyone has received her message. She's hoping that there's someone to sing with. She's a little frustrated that there's no one to sing with. So she puts her hand on the side of her mouth to make it a little louder. She hopes this will work to gain attention, and she screams even louder, la, 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 trying to gain the attention of anyone that's in her environment. Inserting in mental state talk, those thinking and feeling states, will allow your child to attend more towards others' social experiences. And it actually enhances their social exchange. There's another area that we can support for social communication, and that's play. Play is the condition or the environment for social exchange. We can support play by just noticing our child's interest. Remember, every interest is unique and important, and it forms the foundation for mutual engagement, or both of us sharing attention. You can follow your child's lead, and you can imitate or mirror back to them what they're doing. You can also add a connection or communication. For example, if your child is still really interested in tapping on the cup and the tinniness of it, you can actually copy them and connect it to a song, or connect it to a word, or the quality of another toy. When we're supporting play, we might also just explore and allow a child to see what's happening within their senses. Remember, children engage in sensory exploration before they even engage in play, and as they're learning play and language. When you're exploring sensory motor experiences, you might add in aspects of the sensory environment that kind of ignite or wake up your communicative partner. It's always important to notice what they prefer and what they don't prefer. For example, if I add in a noise and it seems to really shock or feel adverse for the child that I'm playing with, I might refrain from using it. It's not what they prefer. I might also notice what they're into and then add it. You can also support children as they manipulate objects, turning things, trying to push buttons and make things happen, noticing what happens when you transform something. You can eventually teach children or show children cause and effect. For example, when I put this on the fish, it has an effect. When I change this action in my environment, it leads to the connection of the two. Eventually, it could lead to something like fishing, which is a little more symbolic or pretend. Exploring, playing, and doing that over and over again is highly valuable for any learner. We also want to make things fun for ourselves and our social communication partners. We can invite or create the opportunity for expanding children's play and language. We do this by adding a sound, an action, or an object. You might add a sound. You might add an action. Drop. That was louder than I thought it was going to be. You might add more objects. I like to remind myself, imitate first and then expand. Add a sound, an action, or an object. And remember, When we're doing this within the context of joint activities where we're both engaged, it's a beautiful opportunity for us to expand and give a back and forth social interaction. We do this by modeling or prompting our child to add a little bit more. When I think about play, I first like to follow my child's lead. That means I notice exactly what they're interested in, and I become interested. Eventually, I might want to expand a little bit, so I might model. If my child is spinning the top, I might even just model stop, go. Eventually, I'm going to stop, I'm going to pause and wait and see what my child does. Even the child saying no, or looking up to me, or putting their hand on mine to spin it again, is communicative. It's meaningful. They're communicating with purpose. I'm going to use something called responsive communication, which means I've waited, not talked over them, and I've waited to see what they do when I stop it. And they do, and I'm going to respond as if, go? Of course that means go. And we're going to repeat it. You can use this model when you're engaged in play and also everyday routines. Remember, you're going to follow your child's lead. You might add something, a model, and then you're going to wait. Any communication is meaningful, and then you can repeat it. Next thing you know, you find yourself playing and communicating with your child. Language is another part of exchange. You might invite exchange by adding sounds. All sounds are exciting, and all sounds form the foundation for words and ideas. You might add words. You might add eye gaze, body language, emotions, or even ideas in the form of phrases or sentences. When we're trying to increase language or invite more exchange, we want to treat all attempts to communicate as meaningful or purposeful. That does mean when your child stops what they're doing and closes their eyes, they're giving you a message. That does mean when your child coos, hoo, grunts, even when your child looks up and looks out the window, they're communicating something meaningful. When a child communicates in any way, and we're treating it as meaningful and communicative, we want to bounce it back to them or restate their message back. You see something outside? It is snowing, finally. You might also notice a grunt and think that they don't like what you're doing, and you might say, you don't prefer that. No thanks. Stop, please. You're giving a message to their message. You're giving words or ideas to their message. And remember, we want to add connection in place of any correction. Even though we really want our children to communicate a lot and often, if we correct them or test them, for instance, if we say, what does the cow say over and over again, they might never tell us. But if we connect with them when we're playing with the cow and we add in moo and cow many, many times, they might actually bring their lips together and say moo. Remember to follow your child's lead, imitate what they're doing, and then add a little bit. You can add an action, a sound, a word, an idea, or even a feeling. When we're building language, that means expanding the words and ideas that a child uses in exchange, we might use self-talk. We can narrate what we are doing. I'm feeling very thirsty. I think I'd like to find a drink. I believe I have some in my cup. I'm going to drink. We can also do it in a simple way. Drink, cup, juice. We can engage in parallel talk, where we're actually narrating what someone else is doing. Narration is very powerful because it allows us to expand the language that a child is already using. Sometimes we might build it up. We might start with and just play with the sound F for fish. We might eventually say fish, yellow and orange fish. There's a 4 on this fish. The fish is swimming. The fish has been caught. See how I built that up? I started with moved through fish and added any words that could go around fish. When we're expanding language and building up words, building up sentences, we want to make sure that we're doing it in a grammatical way. That means we want to avoid things like fishy-wishy for fish or uppy mama. We want to use words and ideas that go together in grammatically correct sentences or phrases. We can also break it down. Once we've caught the fish, we can move it to the orange and yellow fish. Orange, yellow, fish. So we can build up language and break it down. And repetition is our friend. Repetition allows children to learn models over and over again. And once they're primed with mutual connection, that means once they're already connected to you and engaged, they're ready to hear and learn more language. You might also find yourself back at the beginning, where a child is face-to-face, they're jointly engaged, remember that mimics conversation, and they're just vocalizing. They might not have words yet. Treat all of those sounds, those vocalizations, as intentional. You might also imitate coos, babbles, or any sounds that anyone makes. So when you hear your child babbling ma, 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 you might say ma, 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 ma. And then you might add in a word that you think it is, mama, or music, or moo. You can playfully babble back with your child. And once a child is interested and engaged with you, you can even change it a little bit. Mama can become ma ba, or it can become mom. You can add gestures and facial expressions, and you can also just play with sounds. Doing mouth touches gently on your own mouth, on your child's, as long as it feels comfortable for them. Zerberts or even lip trills is all a great way to play with sounds. I like to remind myself to play with sounds during everyday routines and rituals where we're already face-to-face, like bath time, or when you're sitting and waiting somewhere. So let's try to remember that we can play with sounds, we're engaged with our child during play, and we can also add in narration. When we're narrating, we're oftentimes just noticing something that the child notices, and we're making it bigger, we're magnifying it. We're noticing the tap, 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 and adding words, making it bigger. The idea is bigger when we add tap, 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 music, words, cup. We might also minimize attention to something that might not be working. For example, if a child is tap, tap, tapping and it's knocking it over, we might actually just ignore knocking over the cup and add in a different action. So we can magnify our variations that we'd like to see more of, and even minimize and add something that will be more effective for both the learner and the communicator and their communicative partner. You might have a child who is pre-linguistic or nonverbal. That means you might have a child that is in the stage of development where they're not yet using words to communicate. You might also have a child who is nonverbal. They cannot use words to communicate yet. When your child's in the pre-linguistic or nonverbal phase, you're going to focus on joint attention. You're going to just focus on getting that engagement, getting that triangle where you're both looking at, thinking about, even if you have different ideas, the same object, event, or person. You're going to focus on responsive communication. That means anything that child does holds meaning for them. And if you can give it a name or give it a message and treat it as meaningful, they're more likely to communicate again in that way. You can use vocal play, where you play with sounds. Remember also that you can engage in sensory or exploratory play, where you're just inviting experiences between the child and their environment, the child and you as their communicative partner or others, or objects to play with. If your child is verbal or they're using words and ideas, you might find yourself focusing on shared experiences, because remember, when we're both mutually engaged, that forms the foundation for social communication. We might be exchanging information, we might even be exchanging words and ideas, or even play. When your child is verbal, you might focus on expanding language. You might build up ideas or words surrounding a concept or a word or an object, or you might break it down. You might even add some of that mental state talk. When you encourage the sharing of minds or exchanging ideas like thoughts, feelings, and opinions, you're also expanding your child's language and social communication. Lastly, you might engage in pretend play, where you're trying to help the child use objects and ideas in different flexible ways. Let's take a look at an example of pretend play and sociodramatic play.
For breakfast.
Oh, I can't wait to come for breakfast.
I need some breakfast.
I need some breakfast too. I'm so hungry.
Okay, I'll need some breakfast. Sit at the table.
Oh, I'd love to come sit at the table. I'm going to sit in this big chair. Where are you going to sit?
I need some food.
What's for breakfast?
That is cake.
Cake. I love cake for breakfast. thank you for some cake.
Happy birthday, Sophia.
Oh, it's my birthday. I love the happy birthday song.
Happy birthday, Sophia.
Happy
Birthday to you.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Sophia. Happy birthday to you. Should I blow out the candles?
Yes.
Yay! I can't wait. I love birthdays.
I'll help you take these candles off.
Oh, thank you for taking the candles off. Oh, can I taste the cake?
Yes.
It's sweet. Do you like the cake? You do? Oh, I can see my friends going downstairs.
Here's our friend Kristoff.
Oh, hi, Kristoff.
No, that's not him. That's Hans.
Hans.
And he belongs to Elsa.
As you can see in this video, this child is verbal, and what we're focusing on is adding and expanding language and ideas. We're working on sharing minds or sharing ideas and making them bigger in our sociodramatic play. When we think about supporting social exchange, we want to remember there are many ways that children communicate. Children often communicate in different ways. They have different interests, they have different preferences, they even have different tendencies towards how much they'd like to communicate, what they are interested in, or how they'd like to receive communication. And remember, what we're trying to focus on is just connecting and communicating. You can do this by following your child's lead. Whatever your child is interested in, try to be interested. Whenever your child communicates, in any way, with an action, a sound, a noise, or even a movement, try to engage in responsive communication. That means treat their communication as meaningful and purposeful. I like to remind myself to get in sync. That means whatever my child is engaged in or thinking about, I'm going to try to think about. Then I can notice and narrate. I can notice and narrate what they're looking at, what they're thinking about. I can even imitate what they're saying and doing and expand it. I can add words, ideas, or sounds. Lastly, when we narrate our thinking and feeling words, we're adding in that component of sharing minds, which forms the foundation for considering someone else's thoughts and feelings, or even how my own thoughts and feelings affect our play and communication. And lastly, just remember to play. Thank you for joining us today.